So our next speaker, Osian, will explain why people like older architecture more before diving into the role of beauty in development. And he'll connect neoliberalism influence with teaching us how to value beauty more for a more democratized society. And this is our last speaker for the first half of the event, followed by a break.
They don't build buildings like they used to. This is a saying I've heard time and time and time again, and to be honest, it just annoys me. It's naivety, it's stupidity, it's a lack of knowledge about the subject. What buildings do you guys think would come up if you searched what are the top 10 most beautiful buildings in the world? Like, just shout out some answers, please. Like, don't make it awkward. I think I got maybe 3 of those, but they were on the right lines. And here are the ones that came up. So as you can see, they're largely older buildings. We've got, that's kind of familiar, I heard someone shout that one out. St. Paul's Cathedral, Osaka Castle, Taj Mahal, and the only newer ones that are on there tend to be stuff built by Zaha Hadid or Frank Gehry. They're relatively capitalist buildings, either in the sense that they're somewhere which you can go and visit, or they're somewhere which is built for the rich. So in our day-to-day lives, the average person does not experience beautiful architecture, which has a profoundly negative impact on our mental health. If only you knew how to appreciate architecture, if only we could value beauty more as a society, maybe then populist governments that rule our world would take interest in that. We'd get more beautiful architecture, so they could get more votes. Obviously, one reason for older buildings being more popular is a survivorship bias. I'm sure many of you have heard of this, but it's basically the idea that more beautiful buildings are left standing, while the ugly ones are knocked down. So we then assume that all of the older buildings were beautiful in the first place. However, at the same time, the statement that buildings aren't built like they used to be is also very true. Because of course they are. They never were. How is Baroque anything like Byzantine? All of the old architectural movements, they're changing over time constantly. And the one which has had most profound impact on society now could be argued to be the functionalist movement. Now this was a movement in the 1930s that was focused on optimizing spaces for living. One of the lead architects in this was Le Corbusier. He designed this as a model for where people should live in Paris. He wanted everyone to live in these big concrete monoliths and then to go to work in the main city. It was a socialist ideal at first, for houses to be ergonomically focused on people. But it was taken in the 1980s by neoliberal politicians such as Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan to mean that buildings should be optimized for money, and landowners were then given more and more freedom to do whatever they wanted. This can still be seen today, even as locally as Cardiff. I'm sure many of you have seen this building if you've ever taken the train into Cardiff. It's on the right-hand side. 2 big concrete towers. They're the tallest ones. They're in the skyline. You can't see the stadium from where I live anymore. You can't see the Brains Brewery. This was a cultural landmark in the city. Brains beer is a beer that everyone was proud to serve at all of the local pubs. And the chimney of it was a key part of the Cardiff skyline. It's been completely undermined and undervalued by this building, only left there because it has protection. While the building seems to pretend to care about this history. And it seems to pretend to care about nature by sprinkling a bit here and there. But really all of this is false. It's a form of marketing. Beauty in architecture is only ever used as a form of marketing. It's always fake, and no one can ever really experience it. So how do we change this? How do we take beauty out of the hands of the upper classes and the super rich? How do we all experience it? How do we democratize beauty, democratizing our society as a whole? Well, as I mentioned earlier, populist governments love to do things that get votes. And if we all start to value beauty and architecture, we can all get that. So if we develop an appreciation for it and a taste for it at the same time, then there we go. We get an ideal world. We get this beautiful architecture. Our mental health is improved. We experience more nature, more natural life. Now this idea isn't a new one. I'm not the person who's come up with this. There's even been a proposal a few years ago called the Living with Beauty report. It's put forward in the UK. This report aimed to ask for beauty to refuse ugliness and promote stewardship. It had some asks for landowners that they benefit the community and that people can vote on what they think the most beautiful building is. They have to replace any sort of trees that they destroy in somewhere else. They have to displace any sort of negativity which they bring to an area with that too. But this wasn't really focused on beauty. It's still very ergonomically focused. Because we've devalued beauty, even the people who are striving to reach it don't look for what it really is. And that whole thing of people voting on what building they think is most beautiful is entirely problematic if people don't know what a beautiful building is in the first place. Another reason why we all need to develop a taste. Now this is obviously going to be done through education. Education's key to this. You've learned analytical skills in all of your lessons, no matter where you've been educated. But this hasn't been applied to art. Most people have stopped studying art around the age of 11 or 12 or never studied it in the first place. So I'm here to give you today some things to look out for in architecture, some insights which you can hold, some things that you can find. So you no longer think, oh, that's a cool building. You start to think why it's a cool building. Think how it can be applied to your community, your society, and how the mental health of all the local residents can be improved. First of these things is nature. Here's a building in Copenhagen, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce. It translates to mountain. And there's Oscar vertical in Milan, which translates to vertical forest. So these buildings and the nature which surrounds them obviously freshens the air. It's good ergonomically, but it also presents an entirely new vision of an urban society. We can live with beauty. We can live with this beautiful framing, with this beautiful greenery, which I'm sure many of you have come to appreciate living a little more rurally at UWC Atlantic. It's something which we can all have everywhere, not just reserved for the countryside. It's something very easy to put in. But think not only about whether it's there or not, think about how much you experience it. The busyness of day-to-day life and our jobs, in the busyness of our day-to-day lives, it's not natural to go and see beauty, or go to a park, go have a picnic, whatever. You need to think about how circulation will naturally take you into a green space. You need to experience this. Architects need to think about your mental health, consider that, and bring you through these spaces naturally. Next thing to look out for is how identity is expressed through architecture. These are two examples of cultural identity expressed. There's Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris, and there's the Wales Millennium Centre in Cardiff. Wales Millennium Centre in Cardiff is one I can personally relate to, as it expresses Welsh culture. It's got real Welsh slate planning the outside, which is exported from the docks, which is right next to, and the material is reminiscent of the wood or the copper that was also used in the local area. It's got Welsh poetry on the side. And Institut du Monde Arabe has traditional Islamic patterns on its walls. These represent their users. Their users feel familiar with the space, even if they've never visited it before. It creates a real sense of home. But this shouldn't just be the case for institutions. People should be able to choose the houses that they want, choose how they can express it, just as how they express themselves in clothes that we wear, rather than monotonous carbon copies of buildings produced over and over. And this leads me on to my third thing, which you should look out for. You should look out for variety and diversity in your built environment. A good urban fabric is made up of a huge variety of things, a variety of colour, of street art, of shape, of form, of everything. You don't just want the same house over and over. It's more personal expression. It makes for a more interesting environment, more love for your community. It feels more individual, but also more collective, as you can all relate to one thing in your local geographical environment. But of course there's a point of equilibrium to reach with this. If you go too far down that road, it will create a chaotic environment. People will start to lose respect for the space. So think analytically, not just about whether these things are there or not. Think about what they're doing. Think about all the little psychological and sociological benefits of every single minute detail. Look out for this sort of thing in the news, in the media. There are loads of good architectural and artistic news sources. Look into the history and the movements behind it, all the influences, all the cultural backgrounds. Learn about every little detail and stay on top of it. You've got a socio-political newsfeed right now there. It's full of economics, full of all of the depressing things that are going on in the world. Look out for some beauty. Get it into your lives. Show the governments we care. Get journalists to focus on it. And bring populist governments to take neoliberalism's awful grasp of beauty and architecture, improving mental health for all of your community. Thank you.